So President Trump says when it comes to allegations of sexual assault, it's a scary time for men. Okay, let's take the politics out of it and your feelings, good or bad, for President Trump. Let's separate fact from fiction. Are men being falsely accused of sexual assault at alarming rates? Is this a new phenomenon? Has it always been the case? Should we be sitting our sons and our daughters down for a serious talk about the dangers and the ramifications of making false allegations? And joining us for more, Jessica Hayes of Sarasota's Safe Place and Rape Crisis Center, defense attorney Verinia Van Ness, and Rod Thompson of the RevolutionaryAct.com, who happens to be the father of 6 boys. Do I have it right?
You do.
Okay. So here's the question, and Jessica, let me start with you. Taking the president at his word, is it a scarier time for men now, or there, in terms of what you see, what you hear, are there more accusations, false allegations than there were before?
Well, what first comes to mind when I hear that is it's always been scary for women. So that's the first thing that came to my mind when I heard that. But also, in my opinion, it's only scary if you've done something inappropriate. If you've sexually assaulted someone, then yes, it's a scary time, because I think that there is a shift towards accountability and these conversations are coming forward. So the fact that we're talking about this more, but the rate of false allegations, I don't believe is increasing. This particular situation that we've been talking about over the last week has been highly politicized, which is a shame, because I think it detracts from the real issue of sexual assault and how underreported it is, and how victims don't generally have anything to gain by coming forward.
Right. So there are two issues there. There is the politicization of this issue, but there's also the numbers there and the estimates that are out there, Verinia, and you're a defense attorney in Sarasota. Is that anywhere from 2 to 10% of accusations are false? Is that what you see in your practice?
Well, it's hard to say when you mention false accusations. How do we really know whether?
Because there are different definitions between jurisdictions in terms of what is a sexual assault, correct?
I'm talking about whether it's a false accusation or not, and I think that's where due process plays a big deal and a big role, and that's the way our system works. And it just seems it's more, you're not presumed innocent anymore. If somebody says something, you're automatically guilty, and we need to let due process work, because that's how our system of justice works, and it doesn't seem like that's allowing to be happening. If this was a criminal case, it would be very difficult to bring charges forth, because the information's stale, the witnesses don't recall. So I think this conversation needs to empower women in, A, don't put yourself in situations where that could happen, and B, if it does happen, speak out immediately so that the information is not stale and due process can take place. As far as how many are false, I've had situations and cases where, you know, young girls are Snapchatting the boys to come over and climb through the window. And
we're going to get into that for a moment. There's a lot there, but Rod, talk for just a moment. We have only a few seconds left here about how the issue itself has become so politicized because of the Kavanaugh case.
Well, it really is unfortunate, like Jessica was saying, that this is a serious issue. Obviously, I think it does cut both ways to a degree. But because of the way this has been deeply politicized, and I'm going to be partisan and say this started with Dianne Feinstein deeply politicizing it,
okay.
Because she did. It's undeniable she did. You know the news, and she did. And because she did, and because it became this way, and because it became hashtag I believe her, even though there's no corroboration whatsoever, that then makes it become, well, can we believe women or not, which is a shame.
We have to pay the bills. We're just getting warmed up. Our conversation on President Trump's comments on endangered men will continue after a quick break. When we come back, ABC 7's chief meteorologist Bob Harrigan will be back with another look at our forecast. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are talking about President Trump's comments about it being a scary time for men. And joining us for more are Jessica Hayes of Sarasota's Safe Place and Rape Crisis Center, defense attorney Verinia Van Ness, and Rod Thompson of the RevolutionaryAct.com. And let's show again exactly what the president said the other day, and we'll take it from there.
It's a very scary time for young men in America when you can be guilty of something that you may not be guilty of. You could be somebody that was perfect your entire life, and somebody could accuse you of something.
Now, Jessica, let me ask you this from this perspective. I mean, we've been living through the Me Too movement for a year plus now. Could the president be referring to the fact that since we are all now so aware of the problem, that when we talk about it and deal with it, it will include increased cases not only of women reporting rape, but also, because with everything there's a reaction, also false cases of sexual assault.
It's really hard for me to say what his intent was in that comment, but I think that the conversation that we should be having with young men and young women in our society, in our communities, is that we need to build a culture of respect and accountability and shared respect in relationships, and talk to them about consent, and talk to them about these issues in a way that relates to them. I think the conversation should be less about the fear and more about what can we do to create positive change.
Rod, is this something that was not done before? I mean, you know, when Dr. Ford came across with these allegations, you had so many women saying that this happened, something similar happened to them 20, 30 years or more, that this has been a fact of life.
You talk about in a general sense?
Yes.
Yeah, right. No, I think it is a fact of life. So I think we're just listening to the panel here discuss off air too. I think there's some general agreement that obviously, since the dawn of time, men have been driven by certain things more than women have. Men are bigger and stronger. Men do bad things to women. This has, you know, always been the case. Unfortunately, it'll probably always be the case. What I wish is that we could have a culture in which, as Jessica was saying, my wife and I have brought up our boys to honor women, to respect women, to protect women. Their strength is to protect women, not to take advantage of women ever. That's what bad men do. And so we've encouraged them to, in their relationships, that you enter into relationships, and this is where I get called a prude, but this is where the Mike Pence sort of thing works, and that is, don't put yourself in compromising positions that could come back to bite you later. That goes for boys and girls.
We also have a lot of young people in this community, young men and women who, you know, in their teenage years in high school, they experiment with alcohol and drugs, and that's where the problems come from in some cases.
And I agree with Ron in that case. We need to be respectful, like Jessica said, both sides. One of the interesting things that I have noticed from when I was growing up in my teen years, and how my boys, I have 3 boys, relate to women, it's different. I think we've gotten to the place where we've more reached equality, where we can talk to each other like not as a woman or a man, but more as equals, and I think that changes the culture.
We have to take a quick break. We are just getting warmed up. Our conversation on President Trump's comments on endangered men continues after a quick break. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. We are talking about President Trump's comments about it being a scary time for men. Joining us for more are Jessica Hayes of Sarasota Safe Place and Rape Crisis Center, defense attorney Verinia Van Ness, and Rod Thompson of the RevolutionaryAct.com. And Jessica, let me start with you again, because there's been so much discussion over the last couple of weeks about we need to believe women when they come forward who would put themselves through this kind of ordeal if they were lying, but there are people who not only look at the Kavanaugh case, but look at other cases that make the news and say, you know, there are times that people do make this up. Should we always believe, you know, somebody who comes forward, especially in high-profile cases, or do we need to do some kind of investigation? And aren't these investigations problematic because if they happened a long time ago, there probably is not going to be a lot of evidence of it?
Well, at Spark, we start by believing. And there is a nationwide movement to start by believing, not just in victim service centers, but with law enforcement and other partners. You know, start by believing and then investigate the case from there, if it's law enforcement or if it's a criminal investigation. But when you start from a place of believing the person and then proceeding with the investigation, instead of, okay, I'm only going to believe you if you meet these criteria in my investigation, and if you were wearing the right thing and you were making good decisions and you were doing all of these things, that sends a message to survivors that they're somehow to blame or they had some role to play in being a part of that. And I would hope that my children are going to grow up in a society where they should expect to not be assaulted, period.
And Verinia, you are in an interesting position because you defend, in many cases, men who are accused.
Yes.
Some of whom are, or many of whom are, I would imagine, are guilty. some of whom are not.
Correct. And I've had circumstances where a college student was accused of a rape, and we start with believing, and our Constitution and our presumption of innocence. Why don't we start, if he says he didn't do it, should we start believing there? Where do we start? I think in an investigation, law enforcement should just start at nowhere and start with the presumption of innocence and see if they can build the case to the guilt phase. In my client's situation back then, he adamantly denied it. It was consensual. We had to get a polygraph, and my client passed the polygraph, and when we had that polygraph, we were able to establish and charges were not filed. So we can start believing on both sides, but I think in the system of justice that we have, if we're going to have the due process work, we need to start with believing the innocence and then prove the guilt, because that's the way our system works.
Here's one of the problems, one of the many problems here. You know, Rod, the Harvey Weinstein case. If you remember, you know, NBC News had this story, and they would not allow it to be reported because they didn't feel that, was it Dylan? Not Dylan Farrow. Farrow, the reporter who was on NBC.
Ronan Farrow.
I'm sorry, thank you. Ronan Farrow did not have it nailed down, and he took the story elsewhere to Vanity Fair, and it became a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigation, and Harvey Weinstein is now being charged with crimes.
Hallelujah.
Right, but if you were going to look at that story from what he brought NBC, NBC said, you know, you just did not have enough evidence there.
Right, and that's always been interesting to me, that little element of it, because of the ownership connections there. But I think that it's not unusual, because when you have the difficult dynamic of the moment is, and probably has been for a long time, is men in power. So the Harvey Weinstein is the same thing that with Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky in the dress. The Philadelphia Inquirer and the Boston Globe both had that story, and neither of them would run with it because they didn't feel like there was enough there. It wasn't until Matt Drudge did it that we came to understand it, and then we had that whole conversation then, which, by the way, was a totally different conversation than we're having today. But the powerful men thing is the case that powerful men really take advantage of women when there's an opportunity, and a lot of them do. Bad men that are powerful do that. The other side is that now, with a presumption of belief, that powerful men can also become a target. Powerful and wealthy men can become a target of women who are going after them, and we've seen that happen too. I personally think that's probably what happened in the Kavanaugh case.
So Jessica, how do we deal with situations like this?
Oh, that's a big question.
Because we want to, you know, I think we know enough now that when a woman comes forward with an allegation that we should believe them, but we have situations, especially when the TV lights are on and these are rich, powerful men, you know, they're claiming, and the president is included in this because he's been accused by, what, 16 women, and these are not criminal cases that are you know, that are going to make them to the criminal court. Bill Cosby is an exception of that. You know, we circle back to what the president said, that if you're rich and powerful, you know, beware, you could be accused.
Well, you know, I hope that this whole conversation brings people to realize that at whatever spectrum that they are and wherever in their life they may have experienced an assault, that there are resources available for them. I think it's important for us to not think that we have to try these cases in the media. I'm not on a jury for this case or any of these other cases. You know, we need to let the process take place and offer support to people that have experience.
Let me ask you this question, because when it comes to the Kavanaugh case, we've also heard over the last few days, should he be confirmed, it will be sending a message to a woman to just keep your mouth shut. Are you concerned about that?
I'm not really sure where I stand on that.
I'll ask you the same question.
Well, my position is, this is just, if I'm going to stand by, this is the way our due process work. If there's not enough evidence to convict somebody for a crime, if there's not enough evidence, is it fair to not appoint him? And, you know, I'm sorry for my ignorance, but I didn't have the time to sit there all day and watch all of his testimony and all of her testimony. I've heard snippets of it, but being a defense lawyer, I'm not going to make a decision on that. So I can't say one way or another whom I believe, but I believe that if it was anybody else that didn't do it, would it be fair to not get that position because of an accusation from 36 years ago? That's difficult.
All right,
So
but hold on a second. Let me put the question to you in a specific way, and let's leave Dianne Feinstein and that issue out of it, and just look at Dr. Ford, who is an accomplished woman, an incredibly accomplished woman, and if you believe her, she has been really suffered throughout her life because of what she says happened. Why would anybody put themselves through that? And is it not possible in a general way that she saw this person possibly being elevated to the Supreme Court and felt that it had to come out some way?
I thought that was possible early on. I mean, a slim possibility because of the timing, but I thought it was possible. But afterwards, I don't really think so, and here's why. I did watch her because I'm in this business, so I did watch her testimony. I thought it was very compelling. I didn't call it credible, but I did call it compelling. It was very compelling.
So she's just making this up?
I don't know that, and neither do you, and that's the problem. The 2 doors on her house, apparently that had to do with a rental property. She won't fly, she flies all the time. So there's a lot of stuff swirling around it that undermines her. But the key here is when Verenia said there's not enough evidence, I would only offer a minor correction. There is no evidence other than her testimony. She names 4 other people there. 3 of them said it didn't happen. 1 said, I never met Mark Kavanaugh. That's the only evidence we have, and it's all exonerative.
Why would a person put themselves through this?
I mean, it's a great question. I don't know why. My gut tells me is that she really thought she could do it anonymously. I don't know what her motives are. Let's not pretend we know what her motives are. I don't know what her motives are. But I think she really thought she could be anonymous with it, and Dianne Feinstein outed her. Sorry, I brought it back to Feinstein.
Well, Jessica, and let's wrap up this conversation because you deal with women on a daily basis who go through these traumas, and you know, central to it is whether they feel like they're going to believe if they come forward.
Yeah, and we're seeing a spike in our helpline calls this week. We are, just today, 2 women this morning that called that had never talked about sexual assault, that have been triggered by all that's happening in the media. And, you know, they're not coming forward in a public way. They're coming forward to say, hey, I've never talked to someone, and I'd like to deal with this now because it's affected my entire life.
And I'd like to say, I'm not saying that she's lying. I'm not saying that he's lying. What I'm saying is we don't know. Either somebody's lying. So I think our position can be she's lying or he's lying. How do we know who's lying? That's my point.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you all. Before we go, we want to share with you what some of you had to say about last night's show on the race for governor. We are just over a month away from one of the most anticipated races for governor in years. Andrew Gillum is looking to be the first Democrat elected governor in 20 years, but he will have to get through the Trump-endorsed Ron DeSantis first. We went to Facebook to hear what some of you like about the race. And Candy says, DeSantis, the other one, wants to raise Florida taxes to the level of taxes in California. But Lisa says Gillum, he is serious about our water problem and has a plan. He wants to improve our infrastructure and raise corporate taxes to pay for it. Well, if you'd like to join the conversation on tonight's topic, just visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/mysuncoast. We want to thank our guests for being here tonight. Jessica Hayes of Sarasota's Safe Place and Rape Crisis Center, defense attorney Verenia Van Ness, and Rod Thompson of the RevolutionaryAct.com.